No Time to Die, the latest James Bond film released in October of 2021, starring Daniel Craig in the iconic role as Ian Fleming's 007 James Bond. Let me get into this review. First of all, it's going to be spoiler free. I'm going to do a separate review after this with a spoiler review, which will really dive down and dig into this movie because I quite enjoyed it. He's one of my favorite characters as well. Let's get right into it. First off, I'm a huge James Bond fan. The first film I ever saw was as a young child in 1979 with my late father. It was Moonraker, starring Roger Moore as Bond. And then it would continue on where my late father and I, it was a tradition, we would watch every James Bond movie together. Unfortunately, my father would pass away after the movie Skyfall, so I would end up seeing Spectre and this latest movie, No Time to Die, without my father. So let's get right into the review. First off, James Bond was created by a British writer and a former naval intelligence officer by the name of Ian Fleming. And the first James Bond film came out, well, technically there is another one called Casino Royale, but I'm not going to touch on that. Starring David Niven as Bond, more of a comedy. But the real first action-packed James Bond came out in 1962 with Sean Connery portraying James Bond. Throughout the 1960s, there would be a one-off James Bond movie called On Her Majesty's Secret Service starring George Lazenby, who did a really good job, I think, as James Bond, but he only starred in one movie as Bond. Sean Connery returned for an additional James Bond movie, and then the torch was passed on in the 1970s to Roger Moore, who would carry on as Bond throughout the 70s into the mid-80s. Late in the 80s, it was passed on to Timothy Dalton, who would do 2 pictures as James Bond. And then it would go on to Pierce Brosnan, who is a fan favorite for James Bond throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. Then there was a bit of a lull, and they decided they're going to bring in another actor, Daniel Craig as James Bond. And there was a public outcry when they saw it was Daniel Craig because he had blonde hair, and they said, well, you know, he should have black hair, and they called him James Bland. They had no idea how great of a Bond he would be. In 2006, the first Daniel Craig James Bond film came out called Casino Royale, and it knocked it out of the park. It's one of my favorite all-time movies and my favorite James Bond movie by far. Daniel Craig would take on the iconic role in the grittiest, most realistic version of James Bond I've ever seen. It also marked the first time that the James Bond movies would actually connect for the first time ever. Instead of just being one-off movies, they actually would connect into the sequels that would come out later. So we would have Casino Royale in 2006. A few years later, we had Quantum of Solace come out, followed by Skyfall, which is another fan favorite James Bond. And then we would have Spectre come out in around 2017. And then there was a bit of a lull again. Daniel Craig put himself in this role as James Bond for all those pictures. As a matter of fact, he got severely injured. I believe it was Quantum of Solace or Spectre, where he actually broke his leg, but actually worked through the entire movie with a broken leg on a like a cast going through the motion. So that's incredible. He announced Spectre would definitely be his last James Bond film. However, some writers came out and met with Daniel Craig and suggested let's do one more picture, and Daniel Craig agreed to it, thank goodness, and we're going to get into this movie now. No Time to Die was actually filmed a couple of years ago, but due to the COVID pandemic, they made a strategic decision not to do what a lot of other movies have done over the last couple of years and release it digitally, etc. They said, no, it's got to be seen on the big screen. We will wait until there's a bit of a lift on the pandemic. So in October of 2021, after many delays, the movie finally came out. And I'm going to say right now, it was worth the wait. I'm going to get into this movie here. Again, it's going to be spoiler free. Let me just get into some of the creators behind this movie. First off, it's directed by Cary Fukunaga, who's a very good director, very talented. He directed the HBO series True Detective, which was very well done, as well as previous movies Beasts of No Nation, and one of my personal favorite movies, Sin Nombre. Very good movie. Check it out. Highly recommend it. The screenplay was actually written by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who's known for the TV series Fleabag. So it was kind of unconventional these two would come along and take on a James Bond film, but they did. As well as a young, youthful singer would do the title song, Billie Eilish would do the title song for No Time to Die, and she did a really good job as well. So it was interesting. What I will say about this movie, it is the longest James Bond movie in the Bond series by far. It's 2 hours and 43 minutes. but it goes by at a pretty good pace. I will say that right now. Let's get into the characters here. Returning for this movie is Daniel Craig, obviously, in the title role as James Bond. But we have, for the first time in history in Bond, a couple things here. One I will say, because it's obvious in the trailers, is Léa Seydoux returns as Madeleine Swann. This is the first time in the James Bond series that a female love interest of James Bond has returned for an additional picture. So that's pretty cool. So she returns in that role. We have the usual returning key players here. Naomi Harris as Monty Penny does a great job there. Ralph Fiennes as M. Ben Whishaw as Q. And we have Jeffrey Wright coming back as Bond's really good friend, Felix Leiter from the CIA. Then we have some additional new cast members, obviously. Actually, I should touch on, we have Rory Kinnear returning as the assistant to M, Bill Tanner, and he does a good job as well. And we do have a cameo, and it's seen in the trailer. Christopher Waltz returns as the nemesis Blofeld for for kind of a brief scene in the movie. But we got some new players here. We have the main villain in this movie, Rami Malek, portrays Safin. We have Lashana Lynch portraying Nomi, a new 00 agent, and I gotta say she does a bang up job here, and I'll talk about that a little more. We have Anna de Armas. She was a co-star of Daniel Craig in Knives Out. She portrays a Cuban agent by the name of Paloma, and she does a fairly good job here too. Additional characters we have here, we have Billy Magnuson. He portrays Logan Ash, which is the CIA, works for the CIA. He's an assistant to Felix Leiter. They're working together on a mission. And then we have another couple players here. We've got David Denik. He portrays a Russian scientist by the name of Valdo. And he kind of provides some humor to this movie. And then we have a young actor by the name of Dali Benzislaw, and he portrays a character by the name of Primo/Cyclops. He's one of the henchmen in this movie, and he's got a cyborg bionic eye. So that's kind of our cast going ahead in this movie. What I will say, and again, I'm not going to go into spoiler territory, but it's already been kind of in there in the premise, is we have a different James Bond here. We have a Bond that's 5 years in the future. He's retired from active service, and he's living a pretty quiet life at this point in time. And Felix Leiter comes out of the blue, who's a good friend of Bond's, and asks him for a favor. And that's how Bond is getting back into the action here. I'm going to go over some of the good stuff first. There's some cons here for sure, but overall it's a very good movie. First of all, let's get into some of the settings here. The settings are incredible. We're going through places like Italy, Jamaica, Norway, the Faroe Islands in Denmark, Scotland, and obviously London as well. But they're just breathtaking scenery, and the way that Cary Fukunaga films this movie is just beautiful and breathtaking, the scenes, as well as the action scenes. The action scenes, they've upped the ante for Bond here, and they're definitely down and dirty, gritty, some really good fight scenes with Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig's getting on now in his early 50s, but he doesn't show any sign of wear and tear. The guy's still ripped. He's just going through the motions, the action scenes here. But he's also playing and portraying an older James Bond. You know, the James Bond kind of past his prime, but he's back into the action here. Yeah, the action sequences are really cool. What I will say right now that really impressed me about this movie in particular is, unlike many movies out there, the trailer is action-packed. Everybody's seen the trailer. There's a few trailers out there, as a matter of fact. But what they do, though, is they don't show all the action in the trailer. They just take small tidbits of the action, throw it in the trailer. But there's lots of what I call hidden action in this movie that you didn't see in the trailer. You didn't know it's coming, and blows your mind. Like, it's just simply really good. The other thing too here, and I'm going to touch on it, is the filmmakers took a huge risk and a huge chance with a couple storylines you won't see coming in this movie. That's unlike any other Bond film in the past. It really takes a strive into originality and takes that risk and gamble, and I'll tell you, it pays off. But they also hide those plot points from the trailers as well. You have no idea. I will say there is one cast member in this movie that they purposely hid off the like if you go to Google or IMDb, they hide off the credits there basically. So you don't see that this particular person's in the movie. which is quite ingenious actually. So again, I think they did a really good job there. All the Bond things you expect from Bond, the shaken, shaken not stirred quotations, the famous Bond, James Bond, all that stuff is in there. Tuxedos, the fast cars, the Tom Ford suits. It's just breathtaking and great. Now I'm going to get into some of the negatives here, but again, it doesn't change my outlook on this movie being a great film. I'm going to say right now that the character of Safin, the main villain in this movie, Rami Malek, was fairly weak. Not that Rami Malek's a poor actor by any means. He's a very good actor. He does what he can in this role, but he's just kind of sidelined by I'll say, the plot as well as the action of the movie. He doesn't really serve a menacing purpose in this movie. I'll put it that way. He's kind of a subdued villain. So I wasn't really sold on his character per se. The other cons, which I don't know if they're necessarily cons, is there's always in every Bond film some bad master plan that's going on that Bond's racing against time to stop. And in this one, it's actually quite ingenious. The only problem I had with it, it was very confusing to put together. Now I'm going to throw out there, I've seen this movie twice now. I went and saw it last week again, and it made sense to me the second time around. But it was also confusing to the people I went to the movie with because it wasn't explained well enough. Where you're kind of going, why did that happen? There's also a pivotal scene in the final act of the movie where you'll come out and you'll start talking to fellow moviegoers, I'm sure, and kind of ask, why did Bond do what he did in that scene? Seeing it the second time, I actually understand why he did what he did, but it shouldn't be like that you should have to puzzle the pieces together, or put the pieces together, I should say. You shouldn't have to do that in a movie like this. But anyways, I mean, I'm nitpicking at some cons here. Overall, the movie is fantastic. The movie is one of the best James Bond movies I've ever seen. And I will say this right now, it is the perfect send-off to the iconic character, or I should say Daniel Craig's portrayal of this iconic character. This is definitely Daniel Craig's final movie, and they did it in such a way that I respect it, and it's never been done before. I'll just leave it like that. The action scenes are breathtaking. They're cool. They're original. There's not any action scenes that you see, okay, they stole that from another movie. They didn't do that. They're all fairly original in this movie. There are a number of Easter eggs, but I'm not going to talk about those in this trailer. I'll talk about my review, I should say. I'll talk about them in my other review. But there's quite a few Easter eggs for the diehard James Bond fan that you'll catch and go, whoa, just a quick glimpse, right? Yeah, it was just fantastic overall movie. I highly recommend this movie. I will say right now, and I'll probably do a separate thing about James Bond, who should be recast, etc., in a separate review, but whoever it is going to be having an uphill battle of becoming James Bond, because Daniel Craig, to me, is the best Bond. I know I'll get a lot of comments from people that say Sean Connery's the best Bond, yeah, or Pierce Brosnan. I've heard that as well. To me, anyways, personally, Daniel Craig embodies the best of Bond for those 5 movies he did. Put his heart and soul in it. Was realistic, down gritty James Bond. I'm excited, for James Bond. James Bond will obviously come back. It's 60 years of James Bond movies at this point, but it's going to be very challenging for the next actor to take on that iconic role, and some tall boots to fill, right? Taking on from Daniel Craig. So what do I give No Time to Die on a scale of 1 to 10? I give No Time to Die a 9 out of 10. It isn't my favorite James Bond film, but it's close, and I rank them as such. First of all my favorite James Bond movies of the series are all Daniel Craig ones. My favorite is Casino Royale, and I will say that Skyfall is my second, but this is very close. No Time to Die comes in second, just maybe third place to the 5 films that Daniel Craig did. But I will say, it's one of the best send-off movies to an iconic character in the series by far. I highly recommend this movie. check it out. It's definitely worth seeing on the big screen. I wouldn't wait till it comes out on digital release. It's meant for the big screen. I didn't see it in the IMAX, but it was also the very first James Bond movie filmed in IMAX, and it's worth seeing. I highly, highly recommend it. All right, so tell me what you thought of this movie. Like and subscribe in the comments, and also mention who your favorite James Bond is. All right, see you later.